And he and the maiden of the corn fell in love, didn't they? And they married. And we just got to that point today where she came and said, I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. Her pregnancy was swift, magical, unusual. And she did indeed give birth to not just one child, but 2 boys. And the listener named them. What did he name them, Danny?
Burnt belly and scorched
body.
Scorched body.
Burnt belly and scorched body. Very strange. What are the secret names we have given our children? What are the secret names that carry our little rivers of pain? Our story. Scorched body and burnt belly. And when the crone saw them, she said, I don't think these are to live in the house. I don't think we should be feeding babies that look like this. Woodhouse for them. Out with the wood. And the old woman slung the babies into the wooden hut. Well, she was correct. They didn't need milk. They didn't need the mother's breast. They grew very, very fast. And had you walked past that woodhouse, which you probably did, you would have heard the sound of them giggling and laughing. They were 2 laughing boys. They thought everything was very, very funny. And they could speak very quickly. And within 2 days, scorched body and burnt belly made their way over to the main hut, and they peered in. And they saw a strange shape, and they said, what is that? And their mother said, that is your father. And they said, really? Went back to the woodshed, laughed for another night and another day, came back again and said, what is wrong with his eyes?
What happened to his eyes?
It fucked up.
It's ugly.
It is. And she told him the whole story. Them the whole story. And they said, little boys like us live for moments like this. And from that point onwards, they were brought back out of the woodshed into family life, but they were growing at a magical rate, at a speed we can only possibly guess at. But they got to cogitating, they got to ruminating, they got to turning the whole thing around in their brain, and they said, we don't like the fact that our father has no eyes. We don't like the fact that our father has to borrow vision. He must have birthed us or helped to birth us for a reason, and that reason partially is we're going to find them. We're going to find those eyes. And so in the middle of the night, the 2 young boys set out. The camp had no idea they'd gone. The listener slept, his wife slept, the old crone slept. But the 2 boys did something very strange. They dug a hole. And they said, we could walk for 1,000 years and we would never find the hut of the women's spirits with the eyes. But if we dig down into the soil, maybe we can find our own dark horns. And so they dug down under the earth, following their nose like sniffling worms. And before too long, they did indeed find their way to that great longhouse that held their father's eyes. And they looked at it this way and that way, and they sized it up. And they noticed there was a little stream that was running by the longhouse. And Scorched Body, who was maybe 30 seconds older than Burnt Belly. And you know, the brothers never forget this shit. Even if it's 30 seconds, they never forget. He said, "You, I have a plan." And the minutely younger brother said, well, what is it? And he said, okay, this is what we're going to do. I have some magic in me, and we will turn you into a duck. A lot of ducks in this story. We will turn you into a duck, and you will make your way down this stream next to the longhouse where the women come out. Even spirits need to drink, and they will take water from the stream and make their way back in. Maybe one feather from the back of the duck will fall into the little bowl of water that the spirits are taking, and they will drink it. And I will wait outside and see what happens. Now, arakaba, arakaba, boom! There he is. Sure enough, the younger one turned into a duck, made his way down the stream, and at a certain point, let one of his feathers go into the water, and being a good shape leaper like Taliesin, left the body of the duck and just became that feather. Sure enough, a spirit came out, scooped up the water, drank that minute feather, and immediately fell pregnant. This is a story full of information. We have new information. Even spirits get preggers. Do you have the word preggers over here? You know what preggers is.
Do now.
Preggers. She was preggers. No one was quite sure how this could have happened. By and large, they didn't fuck the men coming through. They just took their eyes. So, they rejoiced. They were thrilled. Fantastic. There was going to be a child born. And indeed, it was born very, very quickly within days. The other brother stayed outside, peering in, seeing what was going to happen. And the baby was born, and it was a gorgeous little baby boy. But the moment it was born, think about the moment you were born in a house full of female spirits. It couldn't stop weeping, and it made this noise. Walla, 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 walla. Oh, God, they tried everything. They were getting little spirit teats out. That wasn't working. They were trying this. They were trying that. Until the oldest and creepiest of the spirits said, surely only the buckskin robe will do. I can see it's looking over to that buckskin robe with all the men's eyes on. Let's bring it over and wrap it in the robe of the men's eyeballs. What a lovely scene. They brought the child over, blood dropping here and there like a congealed rain on the floor, and they wrapped the small child in the enormous cloak. All the way, the baby is looking at the cloak for the freshest pair of eyes. He's looking for his father's eyes still. And he was quiet, and he seemed happy. And he was a smart little man because he didn't make any moves on the opening night. He let sleep in and out like the sighing of the tides until finally, after 2 nights, in the middle of the night, he crawled out, retook his larger form, took the robe. He could see which were his father's eyes, and he took his original bow and arrow as well, which they'd also had. And he left the lodge. No one stirred. None of the grandmothers twitched in their sleep or the old sane spirits. And certainly being the son of their father, the moment they've got out of there, they burnt it to the ground. Everything in it, they burnt to the ground. Whatever lives in this world that is taking the eyes from men, we don't like it. We're going to do something about it. And they burnt it down. And whether it was a short time or a long time, they traveled on those great underground tunnels until they came back to the house. The father and mother and grandmother had been very worried. They didn't know where they were. And they presented their father, finally, with his eyes. And they said, "It is such a beautiful thing that you have seen through the eyes of the deer and the raven and the mountain lion and the great owl. But these, Father, these are your eyes. And we love you and we're giving them back." And they gave their father his eyes back. And he saw them like never before. He saw his boys like never before. He'd never seen them with his own eyes before. He saw them like God sees them and us. He saw them like the old trees sighing at night sees us. And the salmon moving in the water sees us. And he was a happy man. Humbled, burnt, scarred, the great scarecrow man. Now these sons of his, as you may have guessed, had 1 foot in this world, but at least 3 in the mythological. And when you have 3 feet in the mythological, you are not going to stay round a small hut for long. And they said, well, we love you, Father, but we have to go far out into the world. Each town in this country has a bone pile in it. Each country is full of men wandering in the woods without eyes, and many of them are not lucky enough to have a smoky bow or a crooked apple. We are on the bench. Capiche? And with that extraordinary sentiment, the 2 brothers, scorched body and burnt belly, made their way out into the world. And I have to tell you, when they did it, they had their arms round each other and were singing low. So as we come near to the end of this story, as the tale of this story prepares to jump back into the mouth of it, I have to tell you, they had many adventures, but at a certain point that only you know about, they came back. And do you know who they brought back with them? The uncle! Ah! The uncle! I kid you not. The uncle said, well, I have aged a bit, and if you could build a little granny flat on the side of the hut, I will happily live in there. Can we get Letterman? Yes. Well, as far as I know, they're still all there. As far as you know, they're all there, aren't they? There's the uncle, being good. The older he gets, the more cantankerous he gets. Great thing, keeps men alive, being cantankerous. Maybe he even became that revered figure, a dirty old man. Pan is the god of all old men. So there they are now. As the Irish say, in radiant contentment, radiant contentment, radiant contentment. Scorched body, burnt belly, the listener, the maiden of the corn, the old crone. And the good news is, they live there, but they also live in your hearts. They live in your souls. Will you make a room in your heart for this strange story? Because I ask you now, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? Because as for the story of the listener, that is all I know.
Well, you know, Martin and I talked for a few months now about what the hell story, you know, for this conference. And we made a decision not to bring a story that had the sort of predictable formula that has been over and over again at this conference. There's always surprises in these stories, but we've had a lot of European stories, haven't we? You know, and there's a kind of a certain arc of progress that happens in those stories. And so Martin found this one, which I couldn't find anywhere.
No, it can't be Googled.
It can't be Googled. Yeah. And so he told it to me over the phone. And I said, that's it. That's it. That's very strange, isn't it? It's not, it's speaking to parts of us maybe that haven't been spoken to in a long, long time. And it has a tremendous amount of mystery in it, and it would be wrong, as we've been taught by a certain Norwegian, to investigate too far into those mysteries. But to speak about what moved you, what suddenly sprang to life in your body, not in an analytical way, but in a way of offering something back to the story, because it's fed us well. So we have to give something back to it so that it stays alive.
Bring back the vision to the father who lost his vision, like the vision.
The courage of the boys to go searching. The love of the boys.
Yeah.
The smoking bowl and the crooked apple.
I heard that.
Now we don't know where the smoky bow is, and we also don't know where the crooked apple is.
Yeah.
But they're out there together.
Yeah.
Sounds like another story.
So, where had they gone? An old thing Robert used to do, I think, would sometimes with stories like this, you'd end it, and then he'd say, "So, what happened next?" And we'd go into small, wild groups, and the galloping horse story would just jump back into life.
The story that caught me was when the two sons were going back to look for the lodge, the long lodge with the spirit women in them. They didn't look on the surface of the earth. They didn't wander around looking. They actually went in a direction I didn't expect. They went down and they went into the earth and they went into a place where they couldn't see, and they had to, listen as they went. And they found it, and it reminds me often of what Malidoma says about, things that are broken in one world get fixed in another. Things that are broken in the spirit world get fixed in this world, and things that need to be broken in this world get fixed in the spirit world. You often, where you've lost something in the mundane world, when you've lost your cell phone, you go look for it in the mundane world. But in the mythical world, in the internal world, in the psychic world, when you lost something, you can't go looking around in the same way. You need to go into a really different direction, one that you don't expect.
Thank you for picking up on that.
Thank you, Tom.
Thomas.
The thing that struck me was all these boys with their kind of seriously maimed or wounded names. I thought they were going to turn into something kind of monstrous just from that. Children of this kind of tragic state with the scarecrow with the borrowed eyes. And they turned out to be these laughing, strong, healthy, trickster boys. Oh, what a wonderful.
I'm guessing that it's a strong male initiation kind of tale. The boy, the listener, and then the boys decided to choose to help the trials they had to go through. The duck with the feather, and the boy, the listener with all the and then in the end you come back to the uncle. It's like going full circle.
It's an interesting clue, I think, with the names that the father gives the boys, and it has something to do with what we've learned about what it means to actually praise a young man, to bless a young man. Has something to do with noticing what's weird about them. And that's weird in that old sense of what the destiny is, you know. And so to praise something weird in a young man that has probably never had any praise laid on it before, right? And so to be given that kind of praise from the beginning. I see what's weird about you. You have a burnt belly. You know, burnt belly and scorched body. That's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. That's where the genius is connected to the genius, is through that wound. Yeah.
I had the sense that the boys had come into the world before they'd already experienced the wounds and had healed from them somehow. Pre-existing conditions. And so they had worked through that darkness and came into the world and were able to function in a happy and
Decent way.
I was impressed with how some kinds of things, to get them back, cannot be done with politeness. They had to steal those things back.
Yeah.
And then they burned the fucking longhouse to the ground.
Yeah.
Some kinds of work are like that.
I also like the way.
Hey, I was struck with the image of the putting the boys in the hut at the burger. And it was a problem. I'm not going to have that. Something of their energy. She wasn't going to have anything to do with it. It almost felt like it was abandonment. And then what surprised me is when it flipped and they got it.
They're giggling away.
There's something really strange about it. I can't wrap my head around it. There's something, you know what it is? There's something very, there's something big there.
Yeah, something big there. That's good. That's good.
Tyler?
For me, I think about these boys that were born, they didn't know their father.
Yes.
They came up to the house, looked in, asked who was that. Their mother, told them. They went back, laughed for a day, came back, and they just, I guess they had this connection. I don't know if it was in an honoring of their father, or they just, let's help him. That's our father. Let's do what needs to be done to make him whole again. And I guess I really connected with that part that these boys didn't know him, and they still did what needed to be done.
They used the phrase, "What is that?"
Yeah.
So no, I mean that's not a correction. It's just really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
What is that?
That whole part really just struck me that these boys and their father.
And something, just for a second. Something I'm very interested in stories. I really believe that mythology is the heart of ecology. And actually, I am tired of the hysteria. I am tired of the statistics. What I'm interested in is a love affair. And I think we need to fall profoundly back in love with the planet. And that means that the stories that I think are truly important at this point in time are stories that hold what I call the pastoral and the prophetic. Now, pastoral, I don't mean like an image of a shepherd. I mean pastoral like pastoral care. So you have your community and you have your stories within a community that affirm the place of the ploughed field and the repetitive patterns. But the danger with those stories is they atrophy and they lack the luminous holes that the prophetic bring in. And one of the things I loved that Malidoma said yesterday after the whole scene with Robert leaving was something along the lines of, when we enter the myth time, and many of you have said this happened yesterday, when we enter the myth time, it is as if the whole tuning of the room changes. And the prophetic, as I believe you were saying, is potentially available. And that can be very frightening. actually, because there are things you do not want to hear or say at that time. But I believe that the stories we need are a strange, tricksterish crossroads between the pastoral and the prophetic. And what I love about this story is it holds both. The images are truly wild. They are galloping past us, and there are moments where we can contextualize it. There are moments that are talking about our life, and there is impacted information and magic in there that is way past where we are, which I think makes it a great story to bring to something like this.
Danny, what you were saying a few moments ago reminds me, again, actually, of the Odyssey. In Iron John, Robert mentions that the Latin name for Odysseus, Ulysses, may very well come from the words thigh wound. And Ulysses was named by his maternal grandfather, this trickster figure living on Mount Parnassus, the home of the Muses, a thief and a scoundrel, and obviously genius. And the one other thing I want to say was, and so I love seeing that parallel in this story. And then the other thing was how getting to the house of the spirit women who steal the eyes, that's something that seems to take decades in the life of the listener, who is himself so strong. He's a listener. He's got the horn. He's got the red robin. He's brought the pile of bones back to life. He's such an extraordinary individual. And it took him decades to get there. His sons get there in no time. He's blazed that trail. And to me, it's beautiful to hear how this story tells us that men blaze trails for the future generations who can then race down those trails to the point where they can retrieve what the trailblazers need, and that way the generations can bless each other.
Notice, though, that one of the big differences between the approach of the father, the listener, and the approach of the boys is one is through ascent, and the other is through descent.
Also, the fact that these characters, on one level, and only one level, abide somewhere within us. And so there are whole experiences that we go through, but then when there's a birthing in a story like that, it indicates some new chapter, some new opening. So it could be within your lifetime, you were both the child, you were both the scorched belly, the burnt body, and the listener.
I'm struck with the beginning of the story as the listener, as the precious child.
Yes.
And there is a heroic
Yes.
in the precious child.
Yeah.
And the losing of the eyes could be with the mother, could be with women, whatever. But the thing that's so significant is that the precious child births those two children, and without any expectation, gets his or her eyesight back.
Yeah.
And so, as I think about my life, we're birthing all the time. And not only that, but he kind of didn't even give them very good names. And that if you don't have
excellent names. John and Paul would have been much better.
Ringo! Ginger Baker.
It's the unexpected.
Yeah.
I was struck by not struck at the changing of the eyes by the father in terms of having the deer eyes and then seeing the son for the first time from his own eyes. Talked to somebody, I've been a therapist for 30 years working with families, and one of the most painful things to try to work with is fathers seeing their children for who they are, of course.
And one thing is that what what did you say about the weirdness of the kid?
Yeah.
The weirdness of the kid is what they condemn the most.
Yeah.
And it's in the weirdness that is the genius of the kid.
Yeah,
Right.
fucking A.
It's
That's
so
a gift.
clearly there, but absolutely impossible to penetrate, the particular eye set that, say, the father has on the kid. So that's one zone. Had a long journey trying to facilitate. And then, of course, the other one is knowing it from as a father, how I can get stuck even seeing him from eyes that don't see clearly. And I think the other part of that is that is taking my eyes out and seeing him for who he is.
Yeah.
That sort of happened to some degree. It had been happening more recently, but I've been seeing him even in this concert or conference from different eyes. That's been a fabulous experience.
Thank you.
I'm not going to apologize, but I see it literally, and I know that whatever it is. But if your father's blind, it falls on the son to go out and find them eyes, which is really not a really great job. It takes a lot of courage, and in my own life, when you bring them back after you've done all these trials, and this job wasn't yours, it wasn't your responsibility to make up for all the sins of your father, but you try to do it anyway, and you come back, and you hand him the eyes, and he doesn't want them, for whatever reason, which is what happened with me. So the thing is now, I really believe this, that I have two sets of eyes. I have the eyes that I was born with, and I have the eyes that I wished my father would have had.
Sure.
And because of that, I see the world differently than I ever could have seen it unless I went looking for my father's eyes that he didn't have and didn't want.
Thank you, Ken. Beautiful. I was struck about the amount of laughter that the little boys had, and for me, that's the connection to the spirit world. Through that, I mean, they weren't, going to see therapists for depression. They had that continuous laughter, but that really moved me. How powerful that laughter.
Yeah.
It seemed silly, but it wasn't.
Yeah. But also that the listener trusted his uncle. Because I remember I had a mentor, and I didn't find out till many years later it was a negative mentor. There's a danger there. You see something, you say, I want that. And someone offers it to you, and you don't see the negative behind it. Then finally one day, I've been going up the wrong tree.
It's admirable, isn't it, at the beginning of the story that the uncle is quite happy for him to leave. And he actually says, that the years in the wood have been attuning you to a point where you could hear the song coming from the woman in the mountains of the west. And when I've worked with this story before for long periods, we will, just like here, we'll divide. We'll have a group of men, those that long for the lover's call, those that live close to the bone pile, etc., etc. And that's one way in. So, I really recommend more personal work around this story, and I'd love to hear anything that you come up with, because I think it's tremendously exciting and very rich.
So I think it's worth noting that the listener, although he did trust his uncle in the beginning, he continued to trust his uncle, because there were many opportunities for him to say, look at this fucking shit I'm in because of my uncle. That merciless bastard. He tricked me into this shit, and he didn't do that.
No.
So I would have some ideas I want to lay out, and it's not particularly connected to the story, but just take a few minutes to talk about some things I've been thinking a lot about lately. And the idea that our identity, who we feel that we are, who I feel that I am, who one feels that they are, is a story. It's the best definition of identity that I have found, is that it's a story. But what kind of a story? Because there are different kinds of stories. And so there's a way that that identity gets made in the society, the social structure that we live in, which has a lot to do primarily with status. And a couple of ways that I've been thinking about how I call it affiliation and affectation. You know, we affiliate with things. I'm a Republican. I'm in the Moose Lodge. You know, I'm a hippie. All these different things that we affiliate with. And that begins to tell a story of who we are, right? And then we have affectations, right? I'm a Levi's man, right? And you know, and or I drive a Lexus, you know, and we affect a lot of identity. We build identity that way, right? And then what happens when the shit hits the fan? That story falls apart, doesn't it?
Yep.
So one way to talk about this is that a story that provides a concrete explanation is an incomplete story. We have a lot of people walking around with incomplete identities. And you start talking about something that they don't believe in, and they'll kill you. Because that threatens their story. So is it possible that the true story of identity is a myth? And there's a lot of mystery in that. The way that quantum physicist David Bohm talked about this was he called it the explicate order. That's an order of reality that can be explained, is incomplete. And that the totality of reality cannot be known, but it can be implicated. And so I took those ideas of Bohm's and put them on the notion of identity. And I want to say to you that the totality of who you are cannot be explained and should not be explained. But it can be implicated. And so I think when we allow ourselves to identify with these great stories that carry mystery, something happens that is both incredibly personal and incredibly transpersonal at the same time. It lifts the onus off of the shit that happened to us. We don't have to take it personally because it's a human thing. So I talked the other day about the idea of primary satisfactions. And I think we can say that the experience of mystery is a primary satisfaction. But what we have primarily in this society is actually whole industries based on substitute satisfactions. And the problem with substitute satisfactions is, quite simply, they don't satisfy. Is that clear? The problem with substitute satisfactions is that ultimately they don't satisfy. It's just like heroin or cocaine. You gotta get more. So if you make a decision to live a story and have an identity that's based on affectation and affiliation, then you're going to need more and more substitute satisfaction to support that identity, to keep it alive, because that's what it eats. It's like a superficial structure. It's like a tree with no roots. One substitute satisfaction, and I'll finish with this, is approval. So it's the primary satisfaction that's missing when we're addicted to approval. I call it confirmation. You know, when somebody can actually say to you, your name is Burnt Belly. I can see that very clearly. They're speaking to your soul condition. And that's a confirmation. And when you receive that kind of a confirmation, you don't need it again.
No.
You'll need another confirmation. But you don't need to be told what a good boy am I over and over and over again. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Amen.
So this is one of the reasons. And I know I haven't explained it very well, but these are new ideas that I'm playing with. I haven't totally developed them. But this is one of the reasons that these old stories are really the medicine that we need. And the reason that we keep hunting for them, trying to find them and carry them and bring them to people so that we can be who we came here to be, each of us, and be remembered. You know, not to remember something, but because we're all dismembered, and we need to be remembered. That's it. That's all I got.
That's good. That's good. So we're just about to break for lunch, and we need to let the story go. There's an old Mongolian idea that when you take a break in a story, ideally you leave the main characters feasting or about to go to sleep. Because if you don't, and if you don't reawaken the story or re-enter the story within 24 hours, the characters in the story will start to come as apparitions in the camp. So we've been timing this very, very carefully, because we've left in some real cliffhangers. So it's extremely important now that we let the story go, and we don't hold on to it in a bad way. Because these are tremendously powerful spirit beings, and this story has been a long form of ritual process. I'm sure you can feel that. And the way I'd like us to do it is something from the old countries. It's somewhere, the Gaelic places and the Celtic places where I come from, and others of us come from, and it's simply this. I'd like you to just put your hands out. Just like that. There are 3 beautiful golden apples right in front of you. Now this one in the left, this one you're holding here, that apple is for you as the listener, for your fertile, beautiful imagination that has played such a part in this story living in our hearts and souls this week. Stories are a triadic experience. They're not just the story, they're not just the teller, and they're not just your imagination. It's when the three things come together. So this apple here, this is for you. You can hold on to that apple as long as you want. The apple in the middle, hovering strangely in the air, that apple is for me and for Danny as the tellers and the holders, and Miguel of this story this week. But the real apple, the one with the juice, is the apple in our right hand. Because this apple is for the hundreds of your ancestors that are standing behind your shoulders right now. And behind your shoulders right now is the woman in the canoe and the dark crow queen and the listener and the uncle and the boys and the longhouse, all of it. And this apple, on the count of 3, we are going to throw it with our right hand over our left shoulder, and they are going to eat it and feel nourished by it and fly back to the myth world. Are you ready? Yes. 1, 2, 3. Thank you so much.